Hey, what's up, y'all? This is me here, Michael Franti, and welcome again to another just invigorating is the word for today episode of the Stay Human podcast, the place where we believe that there's no human that you wouldn't love if you knew their story. And today I've got somebody who's really incredible, who has an incredible life story and has an incredible business story and an incredible message. And he's one of my favorite people in the world. He's one of the most inspirational leaders I know of any kind, be it business or just being out there and inspiring people's spirits to thrive in life. And this is Bert Jacobs. What's up, Bert?
Hey, Michael, how are you, buddy? Thank you so much for the kind words.
I'm doing awesome, man. So you are the co-founder of Life is Good, which is, you know, most people might know it as a t-shirt company, but it's so much more than that. For people who have never heard of Life is Good or who know Life is Good, the brand, but don't know, you know, really what the soul is of it, you want to just break it down for folks?
Sure. Our main product is t-shirts, you know, and when we started 26 years ago, it was t-shirts. It's still t-shirts today, but the t-shirts are really a vehicle for uniting people around the idea that optimism is not the soft stuff, that it's actually powerful. And that's what it's about. It's using the t-shirt as a communication device, connecting people and focusing on what's right with the world, what's right with their lives, rather than what's wrong. And, you know, I guess one other way to look at it is we try to get people to focus on the opportunities as a way to overcome the obstacles. That's what we're about.
Yeah. That's awesome. You know, when some people hear the word optimism, they think like sort of blind naivete or just like, oh yeah, the world's all great and it's fluffy and cloudy. You know, why don't you just go into what you mean by optimism?
Yeah. So you're a good example, really, Michael. For us, we like the term rational optimist.
Yeah.
Because rational optimism means that you don't think everything's perfect and everything's easy and you just wake up and there's unicorns and Bigfoot walks by and hands you a beer. That's just, you know, that's just unrealistic.
Where is that life? I want to sign up for that life.
I'm looking for it. I'm looking for it. So, you know, to us, rational optimism means that you acknowledge that life is difficult, that life hands us real challenges, and that you're not in a magical world. You're in a place where there's darkness and there's light, but that it strategically makes sense for us to pour more of our energy into the light, into love versus hate, into, you know, joy versus anger, et cetera, et cetera. And that's not so that we deny the challenges. It's so that we can overcome them and we can unite with each other to do it. So that's really the way we look at optimism. And you're right. We don't ignore the fact that there's a knock on optimism. You know, a lot of people think that an optimist, you know, a lot of people will say, if you ask them, are you a pessimist or an optimist? You know, they'll choose a side, or clever people might say, I'm neither, I'm a realist. So our view on that is this: pessimism is not a good way to go. It's corrosive, fills your mind with negative things. It spins in the wrong direction. We all go there. I go there at times, you know, but we try to avoid that. It is corrosive for a human and for a group. Okay. Optimism or realism is a step in the right direction, but realism lacks imagination. The optimists in our history are the ones who could see something beautiful before others could, right? The ones who believed in something, be it Bigfoot handing you a beer or whatever it is, but they believe in something before others do. And they're not just a realist. They don't need the facts and the data to show them why. They have a gut. They believe in something. That's what we relate with. We believe in humanity. We believe in people. We believe things are getting better, and we want to participate and be part of that.
Yeah. That's a huge mission, and especially in the era that we're in where, you know, we're bombarded by messaging, be it social media or corporate media. And there's people out there who are trying to, frankly, just spin a line of bullshit on people to get across their political or social or corporate agenda.
Yeah.
And so how did you come to this? And this is I want to go all the way back.
Yeah, sure.
Where you grew up. What kind of a home did you grow up in? And did this, form of optimism, was it bred out of your early childhood?
Yeah, it really was. And in short, I'm one of six kids, and we grew up in a beautiful town just outside of Boston. But our parents' income level was probably below the line of poverty when you talk about 8 people in a household, even though we were in a nice middle-class town. And both our parents actually struggled with depression, and their coping mechanisms were different. My dad, who was a great guy, and he had his spots where he did some great parenting, he really sort of fell prey to a coping mechanism of yelling and screaming and alcohol. And
sounds familiar, by the way.
yeah,
My house.
I hear you, man. It sounds familiar to a lot of people, unfortunately. And my dad wasn't a bad guy. Even when I was a kid, I never hated him. I felt bad for him. I didn't understand it as a kid, but I just wanted him to get better. Now, our mom suffered with depression her whole life too, so it's kind of strange. Johnny, my younger brother, is my business partner. So 2 guys that grew up in a house with 2 depressed parents started a company called Life is Good. But we did that because of my mom's coping mechanisms and what she taught us. Her mechanisms were laughing, music, storytelling, singing, dancing, always dancing everywhere. I can remember being a little kid. She'd pull me out of that chair, spin me around, and she'd turn that TV off, to your point, but she put that music on a lot. And we didn't know it, but at the time, but she was teaching us that our disposition is powerful. And the number one gift she gave us was a routine at the dinner table where she looked around at her 6 kids and said something very simple: tell me something good that happened today. And what would happen is one of us would say something funny or interesting that happened at school, and then we'd start riffing on it. And before you know it, we'd be acting like a family. And she brought us together. And it's interesting because years later, we actually realized that it was our mom that was the inspiration for Life is Good, the brand. And I remember I went back to her and said, Mom, it's you that inspired us to do this. Did you really think things through when you were doing the tell me something good at the table? And she said, no. She said, I was doing it for me. I needed my own sanity. I needed to preserve my own sanity. And I knew you would have something funny, and I just wanted to hear it. And so it's interesting, we try to help others, and we look back and say, oh, she was so sacrificial. She was helping us, but she was saving herself too. And the point is that our house was always going to be dysfunctional, but we didn't have to get consumed by that. We could focus on the things that we were blessed to have. And one of those was each other, and one was music, and one was art. And she taught us how to draw. She taught us how to travel with our minds. We weren't going to get in a plane and travel to Disneyland, but she taught us how to use our imaginations, and that led to designing T-shirts. So thank you, Mom.
Yeah. Did your dad ever have, a come to Jesus moment, or did he ever have a point in your life where he, kind of made amends to you, or had even just one conversation? Was there a point in your life when you realized that he was human? I know for me as a kid growing up with my dad, who was very similar, my dad had 2 emotions. There was either like silence and kind of cynicism and just being by himself, or drunken, raging anger guy. Yeah. And, but I did have a moment with him later in life where he really actually changed. But did you ever have any moments like that where you saw your dad for that clarity and that, the beauty of him,
Yeah, actually, there was something my dad always did. And, if somebody was going to criticize him, they would say, well, that's not a very good apology. And they might be right, but he tried to apologize. When he wasn't drinking and he was in the light of day and we were having a good moment, something was happening, somebody's sports game or something good happened, he tended to say, I don't want to be like this. I don't mean to be so angry. all the time. And that was enough for me. He was making an effort. And I think some of us are, capable of forgiving a little more easily. And some of us, it goes deeper. And I think that's the way it is with my siblings too. There was also a moment, and it wasn't firsthand for me, but it was with my older brother, Ed. And, what happened in my dad's life, it's real interesting. My parents both passed away in the last 5 years or so. And mom got cancer. She was in her 80s, but it was a tough one. And then despite all the dysfunction, they were together for 56 years. And so It was one of those situations when my mom went, my dad went, within a year and a half later. But the last 10 years of their lives were really special. My dad actually came out of the funk, and it was like they were dating again. It was really, really nice. So we can't complain about the autumn of their life. And I think, and I'm speculating here, but I'm sort of proud of the fact that I think us kids, we played a role in getting my dad well for those last 10 years in our own way, because I think he pumped so much pressure on himself. And I think economically, he felt he was failing. There wasn't, we knew, when I was 6 years old, I knew when payday was, because for 4 or 5 days before, there'd be nothing in the fridge. And, again, we're in this town where people have a 2-car garage, and it was embarrassing to sort of run out of money. But the house was falling apart. My dad took responsibility for that. And I think he always, when he was yelling, I think he was yelling at himself. He might have been screaming our names, or screaming at my mom, or screaming at the house, or the car that's broken down, or whatever, but he was really screaming at himself. And what happened, he realized once we became adults and we were doing well, that his ragtag bunch of kids, we actually landed on our feet. So he couldn't have fucked up that badly, right?
Yeah.
And I think he sort of looked around, and we actually bought, the house was falling apart so badly that we grew up in. John and I were in a place where we could do it. So we asked permission, we knocked down the house, and we built them a beautiful new house. It wasn't a mansion or anything, but it was a beautiful place. And it was the first time in my dad's adult life, when that house was built, where he could welcome people into the house and not be embarrassed. So my friends would say to me, "What's gotten into your dad, man? He's funny." They didn't know that part of my dad. And so I think we played a role, and we gave them a nice, or played a part in giving them a nice end to their life. And anyway, there was one conversation with my older brother, Ed, and my dad, where he admitted that 35 years of his life, which was really our upbringing, he doesn't remember. He goes, I don't remember the details. He said, I feel bad about it, but I just don't know where I was. I don't know what happened. And that's a big acknowledgement. That's, he wasn't, he, in his own way, he was confessing and being really transparent. So that was meaningful to me too.
Yeah. When you saw your dad change and evolve like that in that autumn of their life, that's a big part of optimism, is kind of the belief that it's possible that people can change, or that the world could be different than what it is. And did that awaken something in you, and that was new? I mean, you were already well into life is good and all that, but did it stir something new in you to see that, man, here's my dad who was like the rock in our house? And you just don't think of your parents as being some people who evolve and change, because you just see them from when you're a kid. Did that bring something new to you?
Yeah, it brought two things to me. One is just the idea that it's never too late, So I'm 55 years old now, and this sounds a bit cliche to say, but when you're young, you think life just goes on forever. You just do. It just seems so long. It seems so incredible. But I feel like my 40s went by like that. And I have no regrets. Lots of good things happen. I'm lucky in many ways, but I just kind of really trying to be present every day and do the best I can. I think it just made me more aware that there's parts of me that I want to change, and there's parts of me that I know I can do better. I can improve, and it's never too late to do those things.
Yeah.
So I started some practices right after that, like meditating daily. It's 20 minutes, but it kind of sets my mood for the day. And, right here, being able to do it on the ocean has been a gift. And it really I just have a different energy when I do it consistently. I'm a better listener. And that hasn't always been my strength. And and I think I'm better when I take the time to go a little deeper into myself and not wake up and try to fix everything and help everybody. And you just can't operate like that. The other thing I think that's big that came from my dad being transparent on that is something that the Life is Good Kids Foundation taught me, or tried to teach me. They said it, and it's Steve Gross being the leader. Over and over I heard him say it, but it really didn't sink in. And it's this idea when you see somebody doing or acting in a way that pisses you off, okay? What we have a tendency, myself included, to do is say, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you, Michael? You know, like if I don't like what you're saying, what's wrong with you? Where I don't even know this guy, right? You and I are friends, so I wouldn't do that. But if I didn't know somebody, damn, what is wrong with her? What is wrong with that woman? You know what I mean? Yeah. Instead, what they've taught us to say is, what happened to that person? Not what is wrong with them. What happened to them? Because they're probably not broken. They might be bruised and banged, and something's coming out because they didn't get enough love, or they didn't, they're dissatisfied with something. So it made me even more empathetic to my dad to say, what happened to this guy? And then it's not hard. My dad was in World War II. My dad was in the Korean War. when I was growing up, people thought my dad was our grandparent because I got 5 older brothers and sisters, and my parents were late, having babies in their 40s. Yeah. So my dad had been through a lot, he's a Depression era baby. And it made me think about all that. Instead of saying, what's wrong with dad? I said, what happened to him? It's a different era. It's a different time. And instead, I would just be a little more empathetic when I saw him and chatted with him. And even now that he's gone, I feel like I've made amends. I'm okay. My dad, he wasn't perfect, but he did some things right. He did put food on that table whenever he could.
Yeah. Empathy is a word that I would really describe you as. And if I was telling somebody about you, that would be one of the words that would come up, because I've seen you with playmakers, and I've just seen you working with other people, and just being able to see what kids and young people are going through and the challenges that young people face. What was the greatest challenge for you as like a teenager, as you're just coming into being yourself? What was the hardest moment? Is there one story or one time that you can point to?
Yeah, I think that in general, I was in trouble a lot when I was in school, and I wasn't a horrible kid, but I mentioned not being the greatest listener early. Yeah. I actually was born with a pretty severe hearing deficiency in both ears. As I got older, I thought maybe it was because I love live music, and as soon as I could get to shows, I was getting out and getting close to that stage whenever I could. But doctors have told me since that it's not damage from any trauma from music or anything else, because it's both ears the exact same decibel. I don't hear high sounds well. So I just think I had a hard time in environments like school, where you're supposed to sit down and listen for 6 hours or something. And so, I pick up something and throw it, and I don't know, try to crack a joke. And I wasn't always the most helpful kid in the class. Yeah. And I think also because my family didn't have as much, I got involved in petty theft. I always wanted a bicycle, and I never had my own. So I stole a bike, and I got caught with it. I started realizing that you can get food in the local stores, even if you don't have money, if you happen to kind of slips into your pocket by accident, and, just stupid things like that. And then one day we got in trouble. Me and one of my older brothers, we actually broke into a house in our town. We weren't doing anything horrible. We weren't going to burn the house down or anything. We went in, and we actually went into the kitchen. These people were away, and ate their food. And we got caught, and it was a horrible situation. And, our parents were really disappointed, and I just felt shitty about it. And I just made this decision that I'm kind of done with it. and I was probably about 13. And I think I grew up at that point because I just thought, where's this going? And I started investing more time in sports. I started getting involved in basketball more and more. So it was like a turning point for me, really simple. But there was one coach in particular who recognized that I could jump. And he, sounds like a simple, dumb thing, but he basically said, you could be a good basketball player. Like, why don't you start showing up and playing more often? It was all I needed. And that's, I think, the key for most of us. We don't, despite all the grand stories people talk about picking themselves up by their bootstraps, we generally need some kind of mentor, somebody to come along to encourage us. And for me, what one coach did that, it was enough. It was at a point where I was at a low, and just a nice turnaround.
Is that what Playmakers does? Is that what Playmakers is about? Is that being that voice there, or that someone who just says, "I see you," and
yes.
Let's
yeah, very, very much
try
so.
something.
So for your audience that's not probably familiar, Life is Good. We make T-shirts, and $1 for every out of all the profit goes to the Life is Good Kids Foundation, and the active Life is Good Kids Foundation is called Life is Good Playmakers, which is what Michael's referring to. And what we do is we support what we call playmakers. Those are childcare providers. And we focus on children in the worst neighborhoods, in poverty-stricken neighborhoods, children that face violence, also oncology departments, kids that are facing disease, very difficult medical conditions. But what we do is we connect them with adults that allow them to feel safe and loved, and to encourage them and see their strengths, even if it's simple, like, hey, you can jump, or that you have a nice voice. I'd like to hear you sing more, or I just think you're a nice person. These kids don't always hear those things. And, we've witnessed the opposite when a caregiver doesn't connect. It's not always the parent. Sometimes one parent's not there. Sometimes the other parent's got a drug problem, whatever it is. We get an adult to connect with that kid. And when we miss, that kid's life snowballs in the wrong direction. And by the time they're 10, 11 years old, you have intelligent adults, teachers and otherwise, saying that kid's a bad seed. Well, that Michael's a bad seed. Yeah, watch out for him, and as if the kid was born poisoned. So that's the thing we try to avoid. And what we found is if we can build relationships between these kids who look like they don't have much chance, and adults that do a good job making them feel safe and loved, as simple as that sounds, those kids don't just survive, they thrive. And they one day will become playmakers themselves. They will help people wherever they go. And we've been doing it long enough. We've been working with Steve over 25 years on this. And so now we've seen enough little kids that are adults, and they're doing great things out there, and they're leaders. So we got to believe in the people who look like the weak ones, who look like the ones that aren't given a chance. That's one thing I've been taught through this is don't judge anybody. Those people can end up being the greatest.
Yeah. Why should business be involved in stuff like this? I mean, businesses are out there to, employ people, they're there to make money, they're there to provide goods and services but why should businesses get involved in having impact like that?
Yeah, great question. And I would answer it in a few ways. First of all, purely capitalistically, we're living in a world where consumers have taken control. So if you think you're a smart entrepreneur, business leader, marketer, and you're going to build your brand on your own, you're kidding yourself. You're absolutely kidding yourself. We have entered a world in the 21st century where consumers need to co-author the story of your brand. And if you are not authentically doing something good for this planet or its people, people will call you out on it, and they will tear your business down. And it's a good thing, actually, that that's happening. And the opposite is true. A brand like ours, we didn't have a capitalistic intent when we started working with children, but our consumers tell us all the time that anybody can make a T-shirt, right? They buy our T-shirt. Okay, they like the messages and they like the artwork, but they buy it because they believe in our organization. So it's allowed us to build an organization that's very profitable. If we didn't have a profitable business, you can't give away what you don't have. we wouldn't be helping anybody. So that's one. A second lens I would look at this is that business has more touch points than anything in the world right now. Business controls more dollars for the first time in the history of the world than anything. You know, it gone from the church to governments to business. Okay. Mm-hmm. So you look it up. There's more money controlled by businesses in this world than anything. So if anybody thinks that we're going to solve the world's social and environmental issues without business, you are kidding yourself again. We need businesses. And so for those of us that are fortunate enough to run a business, let's feel great about what we do. When I wake up in the morning, I got a bounce in my step because I'm not off in my shed counting my money. I'm actually doing something in the world that I'm proud of. And so our whole staff feels that way. It's galvanizing. Everybody feels, we do a survey every year with our staff, hundreds of people. And they tell us every year the most important thing we do actually isn't making T-shirts. It's helping children have a chance that wouldn't have a chance. So without that, we kind of lose our soul. So whatever it is, you know, if you're listening out there and you've got a business, whatever it is that you have that's a cause, whatever that you care about, my advice is turn up the volume on that, turn up the love, because that's going to help you. It's going to help your business. And collectively, businesses are going to be the hero of the 21st century. I believe that.
Yeah. So let's get to that. For kids who are like maybe watching this and thinking like, man, I kind of would like to start a business. I'm not really sure how to do it. How did you guys get started?
Yeah, so we knew that we wanted to do something with artwork. Johnny and I have both been drawing and doodling, and we like words and messages. And, you know, so the idea of fine art intimidated us, and we were kind of scared of art galleries, and it just didn't feel like our vibe. But the idea of T-shirts, that was something we both tried in college. Just making a T-shirt for a intramural hoop team and doing a caricature of the guys, but seeing them walk around campus on it, right? With it, you know? And, you know, there was a 1986 Celtics team with Bill Walton on the team, and DJ and Bird and Robert Parrish, and being Bostonian, that was my era, you know?
That's the era,
I made
man.
a T-shirt, and it had to be one of the ugliest teams in history. So I made a T-shirt that said, "What do good looks have to do with winning an NBA championship?" Yeah. And we sold them like mad in the street. The drawing was terrible, and a T-shirt was cheap. But we got out in the street. A friend of mine from Fitchburg State College, where I was going to school, and I caught the fever, you know. And my brother, who was actually always more talented with the pen, I got in his ear, and we thought we'll do something together. And then we just started. You know, it was financially accessible to us because we could make a product. We could go print 48 T-shirts, draw something, get out in the street and try to sell it. And that's what we did. And we had enough success, not much, in those first 5 years that we stayed in the game, and stayed in the game long enough to create a brand, which ended up being Life is Good. So it took us a while. But for those young listeners, I think just, you know, listen closely to what you're passionate about, what you really care about, and then give it a shot. Make something. Don't sit around and speculate and talk about it forever. You know, you had to write your first song, Michael. I'm sure it wasn't, you know, perfect, but you had to try. And we had to make our first T-shirt, and it wasn't pretty, but we got out there and we did it. So I really encourage people. I'm not a big fan of doing 20 focus groups and doing 5 years of research. I guess we're a little more street on our perspective about building a business. I make something and sell it. Make something. If you can get someone to take their hard-earned dollars out of their pocket and buy something that you made, even if it's one person who does that, who's not your uncle, that's an accomplishment. And now you look for two. You know, start small, I think is what we did.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, it's a super inspiring story for anybody. And at what point did you realize that it was going to be Life is Good? Like, how did that come in? Like, were you guys trying to think of a name, or was it just that you made one shirt that said Life is Good and everybody loved it? Or
so there were two things happening at the same time. one was we're trying to build a business, and like I said, it's 5 years in the street, and we're selling door to door in college dorms, and we're doing these road trips, and we were talking about brands that we admire. We talked about Nike, and we both read the book Swoosh, which was written by 5 of the wives of the 5 guys that started it, and it didn't paint like the perfect picture. It really told a story. But what struck us is that people at the time and now think Nike's always been around. But there was a point, right, where Phil Knight and Bowerman were sitting in a room saying, why are we all running in German sneakers, Adidas? Like, why isn't there an American running brand? And surprisingly, there really wasn't. And so, this incredible brand comes out of that conversation. So there's 2 guys sitting in a room just like us. So we talked about that, and we talked about how the swoosh came to symbolize for so many of us athletic prowess, and they would call it the goddess of victory and all these different things. So we kept asking each other, what's our swoosh? What's our swoosh? What that's not us really. What's our swoosh? And another one we talked about was Ralph Lauren. And we thought, well, that little guy on a pony has come to mean affluence, something that people really aspire to. And that really wasn't our thing, affluence, but we thought, what is our symbol? What is our thing? And we realized at the same time that when we talk to people, they often believe that things were getting worse. And we had a long conversation about how the media inundates us with negative information. Things haven't changed there, always telling us what's wrong. So those 2 conversations kind of came together. We had this, and that conversation bummed us out. It was this idea that, we're optimists, but is the world getting worse? And then we did research, and we thought, well, actually, it's not. There's bad things happening, but a lot of things are improving. We've cured a lot of diseases. Racism and sexism are horrible things, but they've actually moved in the right direction. That's a hard thing for a white male to say. I don't really have permission to say it. But factually, from a data standpoint, those things have moved in the right direction. And most of us have come to realize that those things are horribly based in ignorance. And that's a good thing. And so we read all about that, and we thought, well, what if we had a brand that celebrated what's right with the world rather than what's wrong? And then we had this ritual at the time where we took jobs back in Boston as substitute teachers. And when we went on the road, we'd come home and we'd put all our artwork up on the walls, and we'd throw a keg party. And we'd have our friends come over, and they'd look at the artwork and tell us what they liked and what they didn't. And we tried to decide based on that what T-shirt to make for our next road trip. And Johnny,
drunken focus group.
Yeah, it was our focus group, right? It was our first focus group. And so Johnny had drawn Jake, the Life is Good stick figure, and it said draw. It wasn't his answer to the whole thing. He wanted Jake. He has a beret because he was meant to be an artist, and a happy artist, not one who's dark and depressed, but one who's we felt that was us. We're kind of mainstream happy people, but we're creative. And so that's what it meant. But this girl who came to the party circled it, and we let people write right on the walls. And she drew an arrow, and she said, this guy's got life figured out. And when John and I saw that in the morning, we thought, that's powerful. So what if this guy's not just an artist? What if he's an optimist? And because he's an optimist, the world's his oyster. He's capable of anything. He doesn't have money. He doesn't have nice clothes, but he's got his disposition. And therefore, he's like magic. And because it's a fictitious character, we could do anything. So
you can make him anything you want. Yeah.
Yeah. 2 days later, we did what we always do after those parties when we have a good idea. We thought we had a good idea. We got in the street and we made a Life is Good T-shirt with that drawing. And we sold 48 T-shirts in 45 minutes. And it blew our mind. It was the breakthrough. It just all of a sudden we saw those people take that hard-earned money out of their pockets. 4 dozen shirts. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but it was fast. They were gone, more than one a minute. And we were standing there looking at each other going, we had no idea how to build a business, but we knew we had like pure gold there. We had something that people from all walks of life were buying. And we got home and we talked about how there's pessimism everywhere. And this could be our unique point of difference to be a positive lifestyle. And, the rest, we stumbled along. We made lots of mistakes, but the brand was so strong. We got the trademark on Life is Good. I mean, how lucky is that? We didn't invent Life is Good. We just trademarked it before anyone else. And so that intellectual property really carried us through our operational mistakes and shortcomings until we could hire people that knew what the heck they were doing. And, these days we got a great team, and John and I are back to making pretty pictures with T-shirts, and the rest of the team kind of builds the business. So, yeah, that's our story. We're sticking to it.
All right. You guys have been around for how many years now?
Life is Good for 26. John and I have been making T-shirts together for 31, and Life is Good for 26.
So as a brand who's 26 years old, I mean, if you think of this era of brand making, I mean, what is Google, like 8 years, 10 years, 14 years old, maybe? Yeah. How is it you have A, stayed alive and stay in the game, but B, how have you evolved to keep growing, and keep finding creativity that not only keeps you inspired, but that is for your audience, keeping them inspired. I mean, that's the one thing as an artist, as a musician, I'm constantly trying to reinvent myself, and I never want to make the same record twice, but I've always got to stick to, who I am and what my message has been, but it's always got to evolve and change. How do you guys do that?
Yeah, exactly. I think now during COVID, the idea that adaptation is incredibly powerful is never been more clear. So people have the misunderstanding that evolution of our species is about being faster and smarter and stronger. It really isn't. It's about the most adaptive. And sometimes that has included in our history hiding or, something that doesn't sound so, I'm the strongest survive or whatever. But it's adapting who you are in this culture right now, in this unprecedented time, is really, really powerful. So for Life is Good, the things that haven't changed are this timeless idea that optimism is powerful, right? So our mission, our vision, and our values are based on that. They're based on the idea that, our mission is to spread the power of optimism. So that has a place in the best of times, and it has a place in the worst of times. So that served us well. The values are also timeless. They're things like compassion and love and gratitude, a sense of humor. We built these 10 what we call superpowers that we believe being a rational optimist unlocks the key to those things. Okay. And so those values haven't changed from the beginning. Creativity is one of those, right? And those are things that we didn't create. Authenticity, right? These are timeless things. Those being our foundation are great. And our vision is to bring this message and these values to the smallest and the weakest people in the farthest corners of the world. So we got a lot of work to do. We went from having $78 to being over $100 million business. That's a good distance, but we got a further distance to go, and that fires us up, right? So that means we got to adapt and change to the times. And I think the way we've done that is by listening to our community, listening to people during their hard times. What are they going through? What do they need? Which things unite them? We started working with musicians like you because we have a theory that the number one thing on this planet, I already said that I think the number one powerful way to solve social issues is business. We think that the number one way to unite and inspire people is art. And music might be the top of the list. We find people that are politically left and right that won't even say hello to each other unless they love the same band. Both those people love Michael Franti. Then all of a sudden they look at each other and they say, oh, maybe she's not so bad. Maybe this person's human. You know what I mean?
Maybe there's a way through. Maybe we could figure out this thing that we're both kind of thinking we're at odds about, but actually there's a place where we find that we're connected.
Yes, we find common ground. So when we learned that, we started making T-shirts, simple things like a cup of coffee that says, find your common ground. Let's find our common ground, those things like that. And so our adaptation comes from listening and collaborating. We learned a long time ago that John and I don't have to have all the answers, But if we work with people like you, and we've been working with lots of artists, we're doing an artist collaboration for other people to create Life is Good t-shirts. In fact, I want you to create one. I'll work with you on it. But we want to bring it to your community, the Michael Franti Life is Good t-shirt, and there's so many places we could go with that. But we've learned to kind of listen to others' perspective. What's their view on how life is good? You and I are different. We've had lots of conversations. We find our common ground, but we go about our lives differently. So we blend some of your spices into Life is Good. And we do the same with poets and visual artists and theater and dance. Our good friend InQ, who's one of the best spoken word poets on this planet, he wrote a poem for us about the Life is Good superpowers. Johnny and I probably couldn't write that poem, but Q did, and he delivers it on stage, and it brings us together, and it shines a new light on Life is Good. It gives a new vibe. So we're partnering with other businesses who make products that we don't make. We stay focused on doing what we do well, making t-shirts. But we got people out there that are making bedding or hard goods for surfing or beach chairs or places where people, their happy place where they like to go to be out in nature, outdoor equipment, etc. So I think there's lots for us still to learn. And the key will be for us listening to our community, listening to our friends, listening to our staff. A lot of our great ideas come from our own Life is Good internal community. I think that's really the key.
As I listen to just society, and when I mean society, I mean what's happening in America, and especially around this election, and with COVID, it's like the whole world has been asked to hit the pause button, and everybody has had to look inside of our hearts and say, how am I showing up for my life? How am I showing up for the lives of my family, my own health, my community, my planet? How are we showing up for social justice, for racial justice? How are we showing up for the environment? And all these things are boiling into this election, and we see this incredible division. And I think that one of the most painful things for me over the last 4 years has been finding ways to communicate my values, just like what you said, your superpowers, your values, the things that you hold dear, and not trample other people who have different sets of values. But there's some shit out there that I think is wrong. And how do you speak up to that stuff that is wrong without trampling somebody else? But really at the end of the day, like what you were saying before, like racism is wrong. Sexism is wrong. We shouldn't be trampling the environment in the way that we are. But there's other people who feel different. And how is it that you as a brand come across those things or try to address those things or try to speak up for those virtues and those values?
Yeah, it's a great question. So let's use racism as an example, since it's been a real big one. And rightfully so. I think we go about it our own way. Just like you said, you got to be true to yourself. In our humble opinion, there's too much focus and too much attention given to the racist, right? And we feel that the energy should be put into the unity, right? And solidarity. So we build T-shirts and images and messages and take space on our homepage and promote those messages. But our focus is on the unity. I mean, I actually believe, this may sound like a silly example, but football finally launched on Thursday. Where I'm living right now in this weird youth hostel, it's like there's no television, which has been a gift, really. I get a little tired of flipping back and forth between CNN and Fox, and neither is the reality, the story that they're telling, and both is a political narrative to, one, get this guy out of office, and one, keep this guy in office, and just tell me the news, So football launches on Thursday. And I went to a buddy's place. It was the first time I watched television in a little while. But what was like heartwarming to me, where there were people of all different races, on the same teams, and I'm listening to the game. And not once did they say this white guy and this black guy. They said this quarterback and this running back. They talked about their coach. They talked about their experience. They talked about their injuries. They talked about COVID. They talked about their families. But they didn't have to call out their race. And I think that, always having to do that, I think sometimes makes us take a step backwards. And again, to your point, I'm not telling everybody what to say or how to do it. Our own view on it is, when I watch that game, if I'm a young person of color and I'm seeing it, I'm seeing a great example of human beings working together to do something, you know? And otherwise, when I go on television and you sit down or I watch television and I'm a young person of color, and I see that every time we got two people of different races together, we got to call that out and talk about our differences based on something so superficial as the color of our skin. I'm getting taught something that I don't think is as empowering. I think the former is more empowering. So I don't know, we all have our philosophies, and my perspective on that, that's not popular with some people. They don't like that idea, and they think that it's a more important thing to get angry and call out and focus on the racist and the racism. Time will tell which is more powerful, but I do believe that the civil rights movement of the 40s, 50s, and 60s had great clarity and a great focus on the unity. And it was courageous and it was dangerous. This idea of exposing how hideous the racism was by having these sit-ins at cafeterias, and, for America, who might have been ignorant about the problem and enabling it in a lot of ways, seeing the cigarettes burned in someone's back or the ketchup poured over, that's what turned the tide. And people looked at it and said, we have to do something. I have to have a voice on this. And the focus was moving away from that. So it exposed the ugliness, but it focused more the energy on the unity. And that was brilliant. I don't always get that sense today from the leadership of the civil rights movement. And, rather than talking about that or criticizing that, we make messages and spread messages about the unity and the lack of tolerance for racism. But I don't want to spend my day talking about that racist, because I just find they don't deserve the attention. Do you remember this time when Trump got elected, and it was maybe like 3 weeks later that these skinheads, white supremacists, got this hotel right near the White House, and they were having a rally, and every major news channel covered it. And all I could think to myself is, don't put the camera on those idiots. That just they are. And somebody said to me recently, there's more white supremacists now than ever. And I don't think that's true, because in a short time ago, everyone was a white supremacist. The law said that whites were superior. That's how ridiculous things were. So I don't want to put the spotlight on just the ugliness. I think that's the obstacle. Let's acknowledge it, but then let's put our valuable energy into the opportunity, which is unity and not judging each other by superficial things like your sex or your race.
Yeah. I want to just push back on that for a second, because for example, Colin Kaepernick, he would kneel, or he started kneeling 3 seasons ago, and the whole football community, owners, the media, to the president, the public, was like, how dare you kneel during the national anthem? Even though he said specifically, I'm doing this about police brutality. He even went and met with service members, talked to them, because at first he was sitting on the bench, and they said, when one of our fallen dies on the field, we all take a knee. This is the respectful way of doing it. And people blasted him. He was blackballed from the league. And now people are saying, well, it's not right to go out in the street and protest. It's not right to throw a brick through a window. So what is the right way? It's like, how is it that people are supposed to have their voice heard? in this world where, for example, when you were a kid and you broke into someone's house, it was like became an issue with your parents. I don't know if it went to court or not, but a kid who's growing up in a neighborhood like where I live in Hunters Point, he's going to get arrested. He's going to get put into the system, in and out of the system for petty things that in other neighborhoods just get treated as like, oh, this kid's going through a rough time. Or they could get shot, So how is it that we are able to speak to those things? And, like you said, we want to highlight the unity, but there's times when there's so much hypocrisy that's out there that how do we deal with that? How do we speak to it?
Yeah, I don't think it's wrong. I don't think taking a knee or getting in the street and protesting, I'm not criticizing that. I don't think that's wrong. At the point where it gets violent against other innocent people, I am against that. I think violence is violence. A lot of people got hurt, as things fired up in the streets these days that were innocent shop owners. That's just as much injustice as the original death on this one, And so, like, I'm against that, but I'm not against somebody protesting and standing up and calling bullshit on something they don't like. I've been known to do that myself, so I'm not against that. I'm just, from a leadership standpoint, I'm talking about the majority of resources and energy. I think that if we want to move the needle further, the majority of our energy and resources has to be solution oriented, and screaming at each other only goes so far. It just doesn't. If we go the extreme on this ACAB, like all cops are bastards. Well, if you're going out there with that sign, you're approaching it. You're trying to fight back ignorance with ignorance. You and I both know that all cops are not bastards. In the same way as all black people are not violent or terrible people, or those are both ignorant ideas. So all I'm saying is that focusing on the solution, it's fine to protest. I think it's necessary at times, and now is probably one of those times to stand up and call bullshit on some things. I'm not against that at all. But then where does it go? And I don't have I think there's a lack of clarity right now on where it goes. And I think we have come a long way. I'd like it to continue in that direction, in all means, including in all social challenges, including racism. So how do we do that? I just want us to be as strategic as possible. And I think I get frustrated. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, one of the things that I love about what you guys do is that you are action-based. You are working in those communities with those kids who are the most vulnerable. And that's, I think, is a big lesson to all of us, is like, how can we help? It's like one of the things that we all ask ourselves as we go through life, and people are seeing stuff on the news and they're like, what can I do? And what you guys are doing as a brand is showing up in that way for in those situations where people are where kids are the most vulnerable. And I think that's a great example to everybody. So
thank you. And I really think it's been a gift, because it allows us to listen to people living in projects and coming from tough environments who feel trapped, who feel like they don't have a chance. And unless you actually listen to those people and see their lives, you can't read a bunch of data and say, hey, just invest more in education and this or that. There's a lot of good people who feel trapped. And I think when we witness those stories and get to know families like that, it fires us up to do more. So I think it's a good point you bring up for all your listeners to just make a little step towards people that maybe you don't understand. Because I do think in this environment, the biggest problem is that the left doesn't listen to the right and the right doesn't listen to the left. The left listens to its own news that sort of feeds its own narrative, and it kind of goes in circles, and it's not helping that much. And the right does the same thing. And I think somewhere in the middle is the solution, and being able to try to listen to each other. That's why I really do think that artists like yourself have the most powerful tool for trying to get people just to take a step towards each other, just a little bit. You're given permission to do that because we don't think we're learning. It's not like school where it's fun time. When I'm listening to your music, it's joyous. But if I'm paying attention, especially at your live shows when you're back on tour, and there will be a sunset to this thing and you will tour again, when you do, it's hard for someone to be there without being a little awakened. And then, I actually learned something that could impact my life while I was having fun, while I was dancing, while I was enjoying this. There's very few places in the world where you can do that, but artists are the gatekeepers of the truth. Our artists, we can't do it without you guys. So you got to keep, I know you work your ass off, and I know sometimes Sarah, I'm sure, is saying, can we take a break? Can we have one day off? I'm telling you, take one day, but don't take two.
Usually she's saying, let's take a day off, and then I do, and then she goes and works on that day.
She's got the same work ethic, and she wouldn't be with you if she wasn't on board with and passionate about everything you do.
We're gonna wrap it up here, but I got two things more to ask you. The first, this could maybe be the final one. What does it mean to you to stay human? But before we even get to that, I got one word I want you to talk about. Frisbee.
Okay. Frisbee's easier. The first one's hard. So a Frisbee, for whatever reason, just become like a calling card for me and Johnny and for Life is Good. I think when we first got asked to do some public speaking, we were both nervous. I'm sure the first time you did some things where you're asked to, when you get the guitar, you start
when there's no guitar in front of me, it's brutal. And we're the same way, and I just needed to do something physical, and so it just became a thing where when we spoke about optimism and the integration of social work and business and things like that, we were really happy that businesses and business leaders wanted to hear about this and really gave a shit about what we were doing. But one thing we would do to sort of quell the nerves is throw out Frisbees into the audience. And I always felt like, Johnny felt the same way. It's like when we did that, all of a sudden it became playtime, and you kind of let your guard down a little bit, and people enjoyed it, and you see the smiles on their faces. And we do it all the time. I do it on the beach here. When I'm walking down the beach, I carry a Frisbee, and I'll just throw it to a stranger. And when they connect, all of a sudden you start chatting, you find common ground. These days, unfortunately, you got to stay 6 feet apart. But Frisbee to us is just a way to connect with human beings, and a way to say that we don't have to grow up in all ways. And, part of what Life is Good is about, and part of our belief is that there's a magic to being a child, and we have to keep some of that childlike mentality, and we have to be playful. Or we'll all go nuts, And so, that's what Frisbee's about to us. That sounds like a pretty close definition to what it means to stay human. I mean, is that part of your definition?
It's a big part of the definition. It's a big part of the definition. Being human, one of the most interesting things I think we've done as human beings is separate ourselves from nature. So you often hear intelligent writers wax on about man versus nature. We are nature. We are part of nature. And even the things that we've made, which seem horribly unnatural, like plastic, are amalgamations of nature. And animals make things, beavers make dams and change the way a river goes. So I think we have to try to discipline ourselves not to alienate ourselves from other life forms. We're connected in some way, and we sort of have a tendency to fancy ourselves the top of the food chain, but we're not. All you got to do is look up and realize that we're one little creature on one planet. From where you and I are standing to the center of the earth is only 4,500 miles. That's how small this little sphere is, and it's whipping around a star that's 93 million miles away. And without that star, nothing happens around here. So we don't understand it all. The fact that you can walk out and pick a mango off a tree and eat it, it's pretty amazing, right? So to stay human staying childlike is part of it, but staying humble and realizing that the world is many, many times more magnificent than we can begin to fathom. That one star that feeds so much to this planet we're on is one of over 100 billion stars just in our galaxy. And that galaxy is one of over 100 billion galaxies. So let's not kid ourselves that we're the top or we're the king and queen. We're just a creature, and we're whipping through space together. So we got to enjoy the ride and be good to each other. That's what being human means to me. Enjoy yourself, enjoy the ride, but think twice and be good to each other, you know?
Nice. I feel that. Man, Bert, this has been awesome. It's always inspiring just to be around you, even virtually, and to hear your wisdom and your knowledge. And today to hear your story, it really inspired me just to hear the way that you grew up and how you came to be and how much of Life is Good, the Life is Good brand is in your personal DNA, your and John's personal DNA and family DNA. And so if folks want to know more about things that you guys are up to, places you're speaking, or playmakers, or where can people find that stuff?
Thanks, buddy. Just go to lifeisgood.com. It's all there, and we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear about why you're an optimist, pessimist, or realist. And just come visit us and hang in there. Hang tough, because this too shall pass.
Right on. All right, this is Bert Jacobs here with me today. It was really amazing talk. And go check out lifeisgood.com. Find out about all the great stuff they're doing. And, of course, buy their T-shirts. I'll be the one to just advertise it for you like that. Because, not just because you should do that, but because they're a brand that is standing up for really great stuff in our community. They make great quality stuff, and it's something you can feel proud to wear, both in the message and also the way that it's made and the people who are behind it. So, Bert, thanks for being here today on the Stay Human podcast, and we love you, man. Peace.
I love you, buddy. I love you. Take care.
All right.